Did medieval queens truly rule from their gilded thrones, or did they sometimes slip away, shedding their crowns for cloaks and shadows? Were there moments in the heart of the Middle Ages, between the 5th and 15th centuries, when queens walked among commoners, their true identities hidden? Number 6. Olga of Kiev, the calculated avenger. The Russ's lands in the 10th century were a brutal, unforgiving place, a patchwork of Slavic tribes and Norse warlords. In this fierce world, Princess Olga of Kiev stood as a figure of emerging power, married to Prince Igor of Kiev. Their union was meant to solidify the nascent Kievan Rus' state, but fate had a crueler plan for Igor. In the year 945, Igor traveled to collect tribute from the Drevlians, a neighboring tribe known for their stubborn independence. He had already collected tribute once, and his return for a second levy was seen as an act of excessive greed, pushing the Drevlians beyond their limit. They rebelled with a ferocity that caught Igor off guard. Accounts from the Primary Chronicle, a fundamental historical record of early Kievan Rus, describe Igor's death in horrifying detail. The Drevlians captured him and subjected him to a gruesome execution, tying him to 2 bent birch trees and tearing him apart as the trees sprang upright. His body was left as a stark message to anyone who dared to overstep their bounds. This brutal act left Olga a widow with a young son. Sviatoslav, who was too young to rule. Power in the Rus lands was a precarious thing, and the Drevlians, emboldened by their victory, believed they could easily assimilate Kiev and marry their own prince to Olga, thereby of dominion. They sent 20 of their most distinguished envoys to Olga, arriving in boats that traveled up the Dnieper River, filled with confidence that their proposal would be accepted. They saw Olga as a vulnerable widow, Iga. Beneath the grief and the expected fragility of a medieval queen, there lay a mind of steel, capable of cunning and ruthless strategy. Olga, in this moment, adopted a secret identity, not of appearance, but of intent. She presented herself as a grieving widow, open to negotiation, seemingly ready to concede. She welcomed the Drevlian envoys with apparent warmth, asking them about their journey and their purpose. They proudly declared their intentions to marry their prince to her and rule over Kiev. Olga smiled, a chilling promise hidden behind her polite demeanor. She told them they would be honored guests. Her first act of hidden revenge was swift and shocking. Olga instructed her people to dig a deep trench near the royal court, large enough to bury a boat. The next morning, she told the Drevlian envoys that, as a mark of respect, they would be carried from their boats to her palace. The Drevlians, pleased by this seemingly high honor, allowed themselves to be carried in their boats by the Kievan people, but instead of the palace, they were carried directly into the deep trench that had been dug. As they screamed in confusion and terror, Olga ordered the trench to be filled, burying them alive, boat and all. Their cries were muffled by the earth, their arrogance extinguished in a horrifying trap. This was no act of an openly vengeful ruler. It was the calculated deception of a woman hiding a burning desire for retribution. The Drevlians, unaware of the fate of their first delegation, sent a second group of envoys, even larger and more distinguished, believing the first group was still at Kiev, perhaps negotiating. Again, Olga welcomed them with feigned hospitality. She invited them to bathe in a bathhouse, to refresh themselves after their long journey, a common courtesy. As the Drevlian nobles entered the bathhouse, Olga ordered the doors to be locked and the building to be set ablaze. The Drevlians perished in the inferno, their cries lost in the roar of the flames. Another calculated slaughter, orchestrated by the seemingly meek queen. Olga's secret identity as a compassionate widow was now a mask for a terrifying avenger. Still, the Drevlians had not learned. They sent a third delegation, urging Olga to join them for a funeral feast in honor of her husband, Prince Igor, a traditional act of reconciliation. Olga agreed, traveling to the Drevlian lands with a small retinue, presenting herself as a grieving widow performing a sacred duty. She performed the rituals, weeping over Igor's grave. Then she invited the Drevlian warriors, thousands of them, to a great feast. She encouraged them to drink heavily, supplying them with vast quantities of mead. As the Drevlian warriors became intoxicated and fell into a stupor, Olga's forces, who had remained sober and hidden, fell upon them. 5,000 Drevlian warriors were slaughtered, their revelry turning into a bloody massacre. Olga had meticulously planned this act of treachery, a queen who hid her true intentions behind a veneer of peace and tradition. But Olga's vengeance was not yet complete. She returned to Kiev and gathered a large army, leading them herself against the Drevlian capital. Of Iskorostan, the city where her husband had been killed, the Drevlians, though diminished, fear a year. But it held out. It was then that Olga devised her most ingenious and perhaps most infamous act of hidden strategy. She sent a message to the Drevlians offering peace and demanding only a small tribute, 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household. The Drevlians, exhausted by the siege and bewildered by such a small, unusual demand, gladly agreed, believing it to be a sign of Olga's mercy. They sent the birds to her, relieved that the siege might finally end. Olga, however, had a dark purpose for the birds. She ordered her soldiers to attach a piece of sulfur, wrapped in cloth, to the leg of each bird as night fell. She ordered the birds to be released. They flew back to their nests within the city, their homes. The sulfur, still burning, ignited the straw and wooden roofs of the city's houses. Iskorostan quickly became an inferno, a city consumed by flames carried by its own birds. As the Drevlians fled the burning city, they were met by Olga's soldiers, who captured or killed most of them. The remaining Drevlians were either enslaved or subjected to harsh tribute. Through these acts, Olga of Kiev transformed from a mourning widow into a legendary, feared ruler. She did not wear a physical disguise, but she masterfully employed a secret identity of calculated deception, layering the expectations of a medieval woman and the customs of her time, to exact a terrible, methodical revenge. Her cunning ensured the survival of her son's rule and solidified the power of Kiev, a legacy built on the ashes of her enemies' misplaced trust. Number 5. Elizabeth of Hungary, the humble healer. In the early 13th century, across the vast lands of Europe, a different kind of queen walked among her people, not in elaborate cloaks or hidden carriages, but in simple, unadorned clothing. This was Elizabeth of Hungary, a princess born into royalty, destined for a life of privilege, but who chose a path of profound humility and secret service. Born in 1207, daughter of King Andrew II of Hungary, Elizabeth was betrothed at a young age to Louis IV, Landgrave of Thuringia, a powerful German noble. She moved to the Wartburg Castle, his seat of power, a place of courtly splendor and political maneuvering. From her earliest days, Elizabeth showed an intense piety, a devotion to God that set her apart from the typical concerns of royal life. While other princesses might have focused on fashion, hunting, or courtly games, Elizabeth's heart was drawn to prayer and charity. She was deeply influenced by the burgeoning Franciscan movement, with its emphasis on poverty, humility, and service to the poor and suffering. This radical new spiritual path called her to shed the outward trappings of her status, not for political intrigue, but for a profound personal connection with those society often overlooked. Her secret identity was not that of a hidden spy or a fleeing rebel, but of a common servant of God, allowing her to move beyond the rigid class structures of the medieval world. Her husband, Louis, unlike many medieval husbands who might have constrained their wives' unconventional piety, was surprisingly supportive of Elizabeth's charitable work. He admired her spirit and even defended her against the criticisms of other nobles who found her actions unseemly for a Landgrave. This support allowed Elizabeth to pursue her passion with a rare freedom. She used her royal treasury not for lavish banquets or opulent clothing, but to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and shelter the homeless. But her charity went beyond merely dispensing alms from a distance. Elizabeth felt a deep need to personally connect with the suffering. Chroniclers tell stories of Elizabeth leaving the grandeur of Wartburg Castle, often under the cloak of night or early morning, wearing simple, plain clothing, much like a peasant woman. She would visit the homes of the sick, the impoverished, and the lepers in the nearby towns and villages. In an age where disease and contagion were greatly feared and the sick often isolated, Elizabeth would personally tend to the afflicted, washing their wounds, changing their bandages, and offering comfort. Her hands, which usually would have held a scepter or a royal goblet, were now immersed in the practical, often unpleasant work of caring for the marginalized. This was a profound act of humility, a shedding of her royal persona to become a commoner, a carer, a sister to the suffering. One of the most famous legends associated with Elizabeth highlights this aspect of her hidden charitable work: the miracle of the roses. The story goes that Elizabeth, despite her husband's support, sometimes faced criticism from other members of the court, who disapproved of her frequent excursions and her extensive charity. One day, as she was secretly carrying bread and food hidden in her cloak to distribute to the poor, she encountered her husband Louis on a narrow path. He asked her what she was carrying, perhaps having heard whispers of her activities. When he looked inside her cloak, instead of the forbidden bread, he found it filled with fresh, fragrant roses. This tale, whether literal truth or a beautiful metaphor, perfectly encapsulates Elizabeth's hidden acts of mercy and her deep commitment to a life beyond royal expectations, a life lived in a secret identity of Christian service. Elizabeth also established hospitals and infirmaries, dedicating her personal resources and energy to creating places where the sick could find care and refuge. She did not just fund these institutions, she worked in them. She would spend her days personally caring for the patients, attending to their needs, proving that her piety was not merely theoretical but deeply practical. She did not announce her royal status when she entered these humble abodes. She entered as a fellow human being, a servant. Her life took a dramatic turn in 1227 when her beloved husband Louis died of plague while on crusade. This devastating loss left Elizabeth a widow at only 20 years old, with 3 young children. Her late husband's family, particularly her brother-in-law Henry Raspe, was less supportive of her radical piety. She was eventually forced to leave Wartburg Castle, stripped of much of her wealth and influence. This hardship did not deter her. It intensified her dedication to her secret identity as a servant of God. She moved to Marburg, built a hospital, and devoted the remaining years of her short life entirely to the care of the poor and sick, becoming a nun of the Third Order of St. Francis. She renounced all earthly possessions and lived a life of extreme austerity, truly embodying the spirit of humility she had always sought. Elizabeth died at the young age of 24 in 1231. Her life was a testament to a unique form of secret identity, not one adopted for espionage or escape, but one embraced for spiritual devotion and selfless service. She peeled away the layers of her royal status to walk among the humblest of her people, to touch their lives directly, and to serve them with a love that transcended the barriers of class and title. Her legacy as Saint Elizabeth of Hungary continues to inspire, reminding us that even the most powerful could find profound purpose in shedding their visible identity to embrace a hidden one of compassion. Number 4. Eleanor of Aquitaine, the Crusader in disguise. The 12th century throbbed with the fervor of crusades and the intricate dance of feudal power, and at its very heart stood Eleanor of Aquitaine, a woman of unparalleled influence and legendary mystique. Queen first of France, then of England, Eleanor was a cultural patron, a political schemer, and a mother to kings. Her life was anything but ordinary, pushing the boundaries of what a medieval queen could be. But did she ever truly shed her royal robes for a secret identity, a disguise that would allow her to navigate the dangerous world beyond the court? Some historical whispers suggest a truly astonishing possibility related to her journey on the Second Crusade. Eleanor was a remarkable woman from the powerful Duchy of Aquitaine, a vast and culturally rich territory in southwestern France. Her inheritance made her one of the wealthiest and most desirable women in Europe. In 1137, she married Louis VII of France, becoming his queen. 7 years later, in 1144, the city of Edessa, a crusader state in the Middle East, fell to Muslim forces. This event sparked outrage across Europe, leading to the call for the Second Crusade. King Louis VII, filled with religious zeal and a sense of duty, declared his intention to go on crusade. And then, in an unprecedented move for a queen, Eleanor declared she would accompany him. This decision sent shockwaves through Europe. Queens did not typically join military expeditions, especially not ones as dangerous and far-flung as a crusade to the Holy Land. Eleanor, however, was no typical queen. She was known for her strong will, her intelligence, and her active participation in the affairs of her duchy. Her presence on the crusade was met with both admiration and scandal. The journey itself was arduous, fraught with dangers from hostile populations, harsh terrain, and disease. It was during this epic journey that rumors began to circulate about Eleanor and her ladies. Some contemporary chroniclers, especially those critical of Eleanor or seeking to highlight her unconventional behavior, reported that she and her female retinue adopted a peculiar form of attire. These accounts claimed that Eleanor and her ladies dressed as Amazons, or perhaps more simply in male clothing. The idea was shocking. Women, high-born ladies no less, abandoning their flowing gowns for trousers and tunic-like garments, riding horses like men. The implications were scandalous, suggesting a defiance of gender norms and a pursuit of freedom that went far beyond what was considered proper for aristocratic women of the time. The reasons for such a disguise, if it truly occurred, are debated. Perhaps it was practical. Male attire might have been more comfortable and durable for the long, dusty journey through hostile territories. It could have offered greater freedom of movement and protection. Or perhaps it was a symbolic act, a bold statement of their independence and their determination to participate fully in the Crusader enterprise, not merely as baggage. Some historians interpret these accounts as exaggerations, or even fabrications by prejudiced chroniclers who disapproved of Eleanor's independent spirit and sought to discredit her. They suggest that perhaps her ladies simply wore more practical traveling clothes, which were then sensationalized into male attire. However, the very fact that such a rumor spread and was recorded by multiple sources, even if colored by bias, speaks to Eleanor's reputation as a queen who challenged expectation. She was famously assertive, intellectual, and unconcerned with convention. The idea of her donning a disguise, even a symbolic one, to assert her presence or to navigate the world on her own terms, fits with her known personality. She was not afraid to break norms. During the crusade itself, Eleanor's presence continued to be a point of contention. Her relationship with Louis VII deteriorated, partly due to the strains of the campaign and rumors of her alleged indiscretions. The crusade ultimately failed, and Eleanor returned to France, where her marriage to Louis was annulled in 1152. Less than 2 months later, she married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy, who would soon become Henry II of England. This marriage made her Queen of England, and her life continued to be a whirlwind of political intrigue, rebellion, and influence. Eleanor's later life saw her imprisoned by Henry II for her involvement in a rebellion alongside her sons. Even during her long years of confinement, there is no evidence of her attempting a disguised escape, perhaps a testament to the heavy security around her. However, the early stories of her on crusade, defying expectations in her attire, remain a tantalizing glimpse into a queen who might have, at least for a time, adopted a secret identity. The exact truth of Eleanor's alleged crusader disguise remains elusive, lost in the murky waters of historical interpretation and chronicler bias. What is clear is that Eleanor of Aquitaine possessed a spirit that chafed against the limitations of her time, a woman so powerful and unconventional that contemporaries imagined her breaking every societal rule, even those concerning gender and attire. Whether fact or embellished legend, the tale of Eleanor in disguise speaks volumes about a queen who truly carved her own path in a world dominated by men, suggesting a hidden layer to her already legendary identity. Number 3. Margaret of Anjou, the fugitive queen. The mid-15th century in England was not a period of gilded tranquility for its royalty. Instead, it was dominated by the brutal dynastic struggle known as the Wars of the Roses, a conflict between the houses of Lancaster and York for the English throne, the very heart of the Lancastrian cause. Fiercely defending the rights of her husband, King Henry VI, and her young son Edward, stood Margaret of Anjou. She was a French princess, married into the English royal family, and she quickly became a formidable, relentless figure on the battlefield and in the political arena. Her life during the Wars of the Roses was a constant struggle for survival, often involving desperate flights and the practical necessity of a secret identity to evade capture. Margaret's husband, Henry VI, was a pious but weak and often mentally unstable king. This left a power vacuum that Margaret, strong-willed and fiercely loyal, stepped in. She effectively became the de facto leader of the Lancastrian faction, raising armies, negotiating alliances, and confronting her Yorkist enemies head-on. She was a queen who led armies, a warrior queen in an age where women were expected to be demure. Her commitment to her son's inheritance was absolute, driving her through years of hardship, exile, and the constant threat of capture. It was during these desperate periods that Margaret would have by necessity adopted forms of disguise to survive. The Wars of the Roses were characterized by rapid changes in fortune. Victories were followed by defeats and loyalties shifted like sand. Margaret often found herself on the losing side of a battle, forced to flee for her life and the life of her son. After crushing defeats like the Battle of Towton in 1461, where the Lancastrian army was decimated, Margaret and her son Edward became fugitives. They had to abandon their royal retinue, their lavish belongings, and the obvious symbols of their status. In such a scenario, remaining recognizable would have been a death sentence. To blend into the tumultuous landscape, to avoid the eager eyes of Yorkist sympathizers and bounty hunters, Margaret would have had to shed her queenly identity. Historical accounts speak of Margaret and her son traveling through dense forests, often with only a handful of loyal followers, sometimes even separated from them. During one such perilous journey, after the Battle of Hexham in 1464, Margaret and Prince Edward were reportedly robbed by a group of bandits in a forest. This incident suggests that they were traveling without the customary royal guard or visible signs of their wealth, making them vulnerable but also less identifiable. Queen traveling with her son deep in a forest. Encountering robbers implies they were not in their accustomed royal garb. Speaks of a deliberate attempt to appear as ordinary travelers, or at least less conspicuous, to avoid detection by their enemies. Another famous incident occurred during their flight. According to some stories, Margaret encountered a rogue, a Yorkist sympathizer, in a forest. Instead of revealing her identity or attempting to fight, Margaret, with extraordinary courage and cunning, appealed to his honor as a man, entrusting her son to his care. The man, unexpectedly moved by her plea, protected them from other pursuing bandits. This daring act of trust, if true, highlights Margaret's ability to navigate dangerous situations by using her wits and adapting her approach, perhaps by appearing as a desperate mother rather than a queen. Margaret spent years in exile, in Scotland and then in France, constantly seeking support for the Lancastrian cause. Her journeys across the sea and through foreign lands would have required discretion. While she eventually formed alliances and returned with armies, the initial stages of her desperate flights would have demanded that she and her son travel in relative obscurity, shedding the visual markers of their royal status. Imagine the queen known for her regal bearing and elaborate French fashions, now dressed in simpler, perhaps even coarse, garments, her face obscured by a hood or a common cloak, moving stealthily to avoid recognition. This was not a pre-planned act of espionage, but a desperate measure for survival. Her persistence was legendary. Despite multiple defeats, Margaret refused to give up. She returned to England in 1471, attempting one last stand with her son, but at the Battle of Tewkesbury, the Lancastrian forces were utterly destroyed, and her son, Prince Edward, was killed. Margaret herself was captured shortly thereafter. Her life as a fugitive queen, constantly seeking to restore her family's fortunes, came to an end. Margaret of Anjou embodies the secret identity of a fugitive queen, one forced by the cruelties of war to shed the outward signs of her royalty for the sake of survival. Her disguises were not elaborate plots, but practical necessities, allowing her to move through a hostile kingdom, to rally support, and to protect her only son. Her story is a testament to the resilience and resourcefulness of a queen who lived a life defined by conflict, where identity itself could be a burden and anonymity a fleeting salvation. Number 2. Theodora of Byzantium, the Emperor's secret weapon. In the dazzling, tumultuous world of 6th century Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, Empress Theodora rose from the most unlikely of beginnings to become one of the most powerful and influential women in history. Her life was a dramatic transformation, embodying a secret identity, not of a hidden physical disguise, but of a carefully crafted public persona that masked her scandalous past and her formidable intelligence. Theodora's journey, from the grimy stage to the imperial throne, is a tale of hidden ambition, shrewdness, and a profound understanding of the complex layers of Byzantine society. Born into the lowest rung of society, the daughter of a bear-keeper for the hippodrome, Theodora began her public life as an actress and courtesan. In Byzantine society, actors were often viewed with contempt, associated with immorality and a transient lifestyle. This early life meant Theodora was not merely observing society from the sidelines, she was immersed in its underbelly, interacting with people from all social classes, learning the secrets of human nature. Manipulation. While she didn't wear a literal disguise, her profession itself was a form of performance, a playing of roles that honed her ability to present different facets of herself. Her secret identity in these early years was perhaps the hidden depth and intelligence beneath the outward appearance of a performer. Her beauty and wit attracted the attention of Justinian, who was then a rising political figure, nephew and heir to the Emperor Justin I. Their relationship was highly scandalous, as Justinian was of noble birth and Theodora's past was considered entirely unsuitable for a future empress. But Justinian was captivated, and he defied societal norms, and even changed laws to marry her. Upon Justinian's ascension to the throne in 527, Theodora became Empress of the Byzantine Empire. This was her greatest transformation, a complete reinvention of identity. Common actress was now the cold ruler of a vast empire. Treated with imperial honors, her past largely suppressed in official histories. But Theodora was not merely a ceremonial figure. She was Justinian's closest advisor, a partner in governance, and a formidable power in her own right. Her secret identity as a strategic force behind the throne was evident in her actions. She wielded immense influence, often shaping imperial policy and even foreign affairs. She had her own faction, her own network of spies and informants, and she was known for her shrewd judgment and unwavering resolve. The most famous demonstration of Theodora's hidden strength and public courage came during the Nika riots of 532. These were devastating riots that erupted in Constantinople, nearly toppling Justinian's reign. The city was in flames, the populace was in revolt, and Justinian and his advisors, terrified, prepared to flee. It was Theodora who stood firm. While the men around her spoke of escape, Theodora delivered a stirring speech, famously declaring, "Royalty is a good burial shroud." She refused to flee, stating that she would rather die as an empress than live as a common refugee. Her unwavering resolve shamed Justinian and his court into action. They stayed, regrouped, and brutally suppressed the riots, saving the empire. In this moment, her hidden courage and fortitude became openly apparent, shattering any perception of her as a mere consort. Beyond her political acumen, Theodora also secretly operated a system of intelligence and social reform. She was passionate about protecting the vulnerable, especially women. She established a convent on the Asian side of the Bosphorus, known as the House of Repentance, a sanctuary for former courtesans and women rescued from forced prostitution. This initiative involved her agents operating discreetly, often in disguise, to identify and rescue women from brothels, bringing them to the safety of the convent. This was a direct example of her using a secret identity network to achieve social goals, her imperial power subtly deployed through channels that were not always apparent. She created laws to protect the rights of women, to prohibit forced prostitution, and to improve the conditions for divorce for women. Theodora also played a significant role in religious policy, often supporting the Monophysite faction, a Christian theological position at odds with the official Chalcedonian doctrine of the empire. She often maintained secret communication with Monophysite leaders and protected them from persecution even when Justinian was officially condemning their views. This was a private secret identity aspect of her religious conviction, operating behind the scenes to influence outcomes. Her early life experiences had given her an intimate knowledge of the city's underbelly, its criminal elements, and its hidden power structures. She understood the psychology of the common people and the machinations of the elite. This understanding, gained from her years of performance and direct engagement with society, became a formidable asset in her role as empress. She was Justinian's trusted confidant, his strategic partner, and often his secret weapon. Empress Theodora's secret identity was not a cloak and dagger disguise in the traditional sense, but a powerful hidden personal history and a veiled strategic brilliance that allowed her to navigate the treacherous currents of Byzantine politics. She transformed herself from a societal outcast to an empress who effectively ruled an empire, never forgetting her roots, and often using her unique insights to shake the world around her from behind the veil of imperial dignity. Number 1. Empress Matilda, the Snow White Escape. The 12th century in England was a time of immense turmoil, a period of civil war known as the Anarchy. At its heart was a bitter struggle for the throne between two powerful cousins, Stephen, who had seized the crown upon the death of Henry I, and Empress Matilda, Henry's legitimate daughter and designated heir. Matilda, a strong-willed and intelligent woman, had been married to the Holy Roman Emperor, earning her the title Empress. After his death, she returned to England to claim her birthright. Conflict plunged England into decades of chaos marked by shifting alliances, sieges, and desperate acts. It was during one of the most perilous moments of this war that Empress Matilda adopted a spectacular, chilling disguise to save her life and continue her fight for the crown. It was the winter of 1142, a season of brutal cold and heavy snow. Empress Matilda found herself trapped within the walls of Oxford Castle. King Stephen, her rival, had besieged the stronghold, intent on capturing her and ending her claim to the throne once and for all. The siege had dragged on for 3 long months. Food supplies within the castle were dwindling, and the winter conditions were harsh, biting deep into the besieged garrison. Matilda's position was becoming untenable. Surrender seemed inevitable. The castle was surrounded by Stephen's forces, their sentries ever vigilant, their lines drawn tight. Escape appeared impossible, but Matilda was not one to yield easily. She had faced down emperors and kings. She would not be taken prisoner now. As the days grew colder and the snow fell thicker, an audacious plan began to form. The River Thames, which ran past the castle, had frozen solid under the relentless cold. The entire landscape was blanketed in a thick, pristine layer of snow, stretching out silently under the moonlit nights. This frozen white world, usually a barrier, became the key to her desperate gamble. On a night shrouded in the deepest darkness, as a fresh blizzard began to whip through the air, Empress Matilda initiated her daring escape. She shed her royal garments, her silks and furs that would have marked her instantly. As the Empress, instead she donned a plain white cloak. This was her disguise, a simple garment chosen not to transform her into a commoner, but to make her vanish into the winter landscape itself. Her white cloak blended, passing with the newly fallen snow, making her almost invisible against the frozen ground in the swirling blizzard. It was a disguise designed for camouflage, for illusion, for disappearance. With a few loyal knights who also wore white to blend with the ghostly terrain, Matilda slipped out of a postern gate, a small, inconspicuous door, in the dead of night. The wind howled and the snow stung their faces, but it also provided perfect cover. The blizzard was so fierce that it drastically reduced visibility, muffling sounds and forcing Stephen's sentries to huddle for warmth, their patrols less diligent than usual. Under the very noses of her enemies, the Empress, cloaked in white, moved silently across the frozen river. The journey across the treacherous ice and through the swirling snow was undoubtedly harrowing. Every step was a risk, every gust of wind a potential revealer. Cold was unbearable, threatening to claim them even if Stephen's men did not. But the urgency of their mission, the desperate need for freedom propelled them onward. Accounts suggest they walked for miles across the frozen Thames, a ghost procession in the white night before reaching safety. Matilda and her companions eventually reached Abingdon, a town just a few miles away, where they found refuge. From there she continued on to Wallingford Castle, a stronghold still held by her supporters. Her escape was a profound shock to Stephen's forces. To have the Empress vanish from a besieged castle seemingly into thin air was a blow to their morale, and a powerful testament to Matilda's cunning and tenacity. It demonstrated that she was not a queen to be easily defeated or captured. This dramatic escape from Oxford Castle, meticulously planned and executed under the cover of a white disguise, became one of the defining moments of the anarchy. It cemented Empress Matilda's reputation as a resilient and resourceful leader who would stop at nothing to secure her claim to the throne. While she never ultimately ruled England as a crowned queen, her unwavering fight and this extraordinary act of subterfuge ensured that her son Henry II would eventually inherit the throne, bringing an end to the long civil war. The snow-white cloak she wore on that fateful night became more than just a disguise. It became a symbol of her indomitable will, a hidden identity that allowed her to literally disappear from the clutches of her enemies and continue her relentless pursuit of power. From the chilling cunning of Olga of Kiev to the defiant bravery of Empress Matilda, the medieval world harbored queens who were anything but predictable. They walked among us hidden in plain sight, their secret lives shaping history in ways we are only now beginning to uncover.